Hey guys, this is a overall review of my Edelbrock E4 Supercharger install and mods and my kind of overall thoughts on it. The Supercharger itself wasn't that pain of an install. I mean, everything else just took forever. I actually started on this project before Thanksgiving of 2015, so like 6, 7 months ago, and I started with the fuel system. The Corvettes have the worst fuel system I've ever seen. They've got two tanks, got a tank on the driver's side and a tank on the passenger side with a tube that connects it. And for you to take the tank out, you actually have to drop a lot of the stuff in the back. I found it was easier to remove the mufflers and pull them completely out from the axle back, because there's an H pipe that goes to the back, and then you got the axle back. Take the axle back mufflers out. Mine are Corsa, and took those out, and everything, it gave me enough room. But then what I ended up doing was, my car, this is a 2005, so it's 11 plus years old now, and what had happened was, all the ethanol in the fuel caused all of the plastic lines to like glue together. I ended up snapping like 3 lines inside the fuel system itself, and I had to replace the crossover tube, the 2 lines in the crossover tube. I ended up replacing the plastic hoses inside the driver's side, and since I'd already snapped the ones in the driver's side, I actually just decided to replace the ones on the passenger side too. I think there were $50 each, maybe 40. I mean, not kind of expensive for plastic tubes, but I've wasted more expensive money on stupider stuff. So, but that fuel system just took forever. Probably took me like a month. Working on it after work on the weekends, and just waiting for parts, because I was delayed a lot because of just waiting for parts. Anyway, I got the Z06 fuel pump installed. That went in with no problem. I also ended up replacing the fuel level sensor on both sides of the gas tank, because the Corvettes, GM in general, I've seen them go bad on Grand Ams, W bodies, Grand Prix, Impalas, stuff like that. So I ended up replacing the fuel level sensor on both of them. I think they were $11 each. So it wasn't too expensive. The only thing about that fuel level sensor was the wires weren't really wired. There was no wiring diagram with it, so I kind of just guessed on where the fuel level sensor, where the pins went into the harness, and I ended up guessing right, because I haven't had a problem with it. Because the driver's side, unfortunately, I didn't really pay attention to when I took it apart. The passenger side I did, so that side's fine, but this side was a guess. Oh yeah, and I actually had a leak, a fuel leak on the driver's side, because I didn't tighten the circle ring, the fuel pump retainer ring all the way. I thought I'd gotten it, but you need to like really smash it, and I was smelling fuel every time I got in and out of the car, because the fuel tank's right there. Yeah, so that I ended up dropping the driver's side tank again. But all in the meantime, while I'm doing this, I decided to remove the actual drivetrain. I removed the transmission, the diff, and the torque tube, all in one fell swoop, because after working on it for a couple weeks, and your arms are up and over the exhaust and the transmission, it's a big pain in the ass. So I decided to just drop the drivetrain out. I ended up having I actually have a transmission jack over there that I cut down for my max jacks setup, and dropped it down with no problem. Put a new LS7 clutch in the car, and we ended up replacing the input bearing on the back of the motor, replace the flywheel, as well as the rear crankshaft seal. It was like $40 for just like the metal bracket. came in new bolts, the bracket, and the new seal. I just ended up replacing all that because it was cheaper than buying the seal itself. You can just buy the whole assembly. So I put that in. And then I put the clutch back in. I didn't really have any issues there. And then, after I got that back up in the car, I got the fuel assembly done. Of course, you always find a problem later. I got the car, with a new clutch, the new fuel system. I did it in stages. New clutch, new fuel system. And that's when I discovered the leak. And so, I'm like, there's no way I'm dropping the whole drivetrain just to fix a leak. So I ended up taking the mufflers out, and with the Corvette, it's not too bad. Got the mufflers out and found the leak on the driver's side. Like I said, tighten that over the fuel pump clamp tighter, and I haven't had a problem since. So that took probably a month and a half. I made an appointment with PCM of North Carolina back in January. Time frame's about right. And they were booked for 2 months. So I couldn't get my tune until March, mid-March, March 15th, something like that. So I had 2 months to put the blower on. I had like 8+ weeks or so. So got the car, with the clutch in. I put a couple hundred miles on it. It's winter. Not that North Carolina gets a lot of winter, but they still, roads suck. It's cold, and I've got I had summer road course tires on here, but that's a whole different story. And I ended up putting a couple hundred miles on the car. Did the fuel system, just the fuel pump. I hadn't done the injectors yet, and put everything together and decided to tear the car apart again. So I did it in stages. Did fuel, clutch, kind of fuel again with the leak. Then I did the actual supercharger install, and like I said, I only had about 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks to finish the supercharger setup and figure everything out before I had my appointment with PCM of North Carolina. I had a buddy come over. He helped me put the blower into the car because that thing weighs a solid 75 to 100 pounds. That thing's heavy. I ended up taking the front bumper off because you have to put the intercooler heat exchanger on the front of the car, so I took the front bumper off. You also have a Bosch water pump, or they call it water pump, but it's basically just an intercooler pump that's down below the headlight next to the horns. Real weird thing, because this is actually an LS3. I think it's like 1591 is their part number. Supercharger kit. It's for an LS3 Corvette for an '08 up. And they ended up, the instructions said you had to move the horns and use this bracket, and the instructions were shit, to be honest. I ended up I just ended up drilling a hole, putting a bolt through the bumper. It's an aluminum front subframe, not the actual engine front, but it's like a bumper frame. Put a hole through it, put the hardware in, use the mounting hardware that came with the pump, and that ended up just bolting right on. After I got the pump bolted in, ran all the coolant hoses to the tank. That tank is a big pain in the ass because I don't have a dry sump car. I've got the old wet sump, plus 05s didn't come with that. So I've got the battery right there, and I had to move the battery over, like that battery shoved into the corner, then you got the pump, and you have to take the wheel off the car because there's bolts that come through the inner fender liner right there, that plastic fender liner, and that's how you attach the coolant tank. Got all the hoses ran, and then put the blower in, put the intercooler in. Sorry, heat exchanger. I think I'm not using the right terms. Connected everything up. Fired it up. Oh, and I also went from 60 pound an hour injectors to 95 pound per hour injectors. I think they call them 1000 cc injectors. I could be wrong. Anyway, PCM of North Carolina recommended it because this car has got an LS9 cam. It's got the Cook's long tube headers, Corsa exhaust, and they said the 60 pound injectors. Oh, I'm sorry. The Edelbrock comes with a 52 pound per hour injector. But I already knew I was going to be maxing those out. So I had already had 60-pound injectors on the car. PCM said, you might be running into, max injector duty cycle with those. So I ordered injectors through them, got them, put them in, and fired up the car. I figured the car was going to run like shit because, you're running, it's got boost, it's not tuned for it. I fired it up a couple times, the thing wouldn't run. So I actually had already called up a tow truck for the day of my tune to to flatbed the car from my place up to Mooresville, where PCM's located. And I actually fired the car up and it drove. I only drove the car about 15 feet because I had to back it out of the shop and back it into the front of the driveway. And the tow truck came and, took the car up there. They didn't have any real issues. I think maybe they had to put more coolant in it because I didn't let the car run hot enough to get proper amount of coolant in it. I think they put coolant in it, and that's really about it. Actually, I had managed to cut one of the wires on the coil pack harness, and they said that I was getting an I was getting a random misfire on one of the coil packs. And this was before I painted everything. This was just, I had the stock coil packs. Well, these are stock. This is before I started screwing on with any of the valve covers, any of that. And, I was later taking it apart. I found I had cut through like 2 of the coil pack wires, so I ended up ordering a new harness. I think this little harness here was about $40. Nothing too crazy, but put that on and it fired right. Actually, it didn't. I had it backwards, and the cylinders were misfiring. So make sure you put your coil pack harness on the right way. You can put it in backwards. I corrected that and it fired right up. Other than that, I really haven't had any big issues. So PCM put a tune on the car. They dynoed it and made 580 rear wheel horsepower. I had the car previously dynoed there on their same machine. It made 450 rear wheel horsepower with Cook's long tube headers, the LS9 cam. I have CNC machined ported LS3 heads on here and LS3 intake, and I had the 60-pound injectors on that setup, and it made 450. Bigger injectors, adding the blower, clutch, that doesn't really translate to horsepower, but so basically the blower, injectors, took it to 580 rear wheel horsepower, which is, above 600 at the crank. So, I'm totally happy with it. I think, 620 to 640 is kind of the numbers I've been seeing on the internet, but whatever, internet, as they say, if it's on the internet, it has to be true, right? But no, I'm just kidding. 580, I'm pretty happy with it. I do have a 3.25-inch pulley, so 3¼ pulley on the blower. It's making, I've data logged it. It was either 8.5 or 9 pounds of boost. I think the stock pulley was, actually I have it over here. The stock pulley is this one. So stock pulley is 3.875. That actually wasn't on the blower. This is the pulley that came on the blower, was 3.5-inch pulley. I upgraded to the 3.25-inch pulley just because I wanted a little bit more PSI, a little bit more pounds of boost out of it, because I knew the ported heads and the long tube headers, this thing is just going to flow a lot more. And so like I said, so 3¼ pulley. As in my other videos, you'll see I had an issue with the Holley valve covers I had on it here. I've got the LS9 valve covers. I got the Elite Engineering catch can and the Haltech Beehive intake shroud. I don't think I'm going to get it re-dynoed. There's really no point. It's all just bolt-on stuff. But yeah, overall, 580 horsepower. I bought my blower used on eBay, and I got it for a steal, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Here's an overall shot of the car. It's dirty. I haven't cleaned it. But you know, other than that, pretty happy with the setup. Thank you for watching this long video and me just rambling. If you have any questions, feel free to comment on the page or send me a private message and I'll get back to you. Thank you.